So anyway, so I'll jump in and introduce myself. I am Pastor Bradley. I'm one of three of the pastors at Gloria Day. My colleagues are Pastor Lois Pallmeyer and Pastor Javen Swanson. I've been at Gloria Day for 8 years now and moved here from Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm glad to be in a place with so much winter. And I'm really glad to be part of this discussion with all of you tonight. Normally, Pastor Lois does this, but she was teaching our other group tonight. So I got to jump in and be part of this. So I'm really grateful for that and grateful for the long partnership that Gloria Day and Mount Zion have had. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but we've been friends for a really long time, longer than all of us were born. So welcome.
And I am Rabbi Adam Stock-Spilker, and I've been at Mount Zion for 23 years, and it is a joy to be doing this kind of conversation, even by Zoom. And we really hope that you will feel connected today, learn something, and maybe some of you know each other from school, some of you might, but all of you will have the opportunity to feel like you've listened and talked with each other in a deeper way than maybe normally might happen. That's part of our goal tonight. I'm thinking I will share my screen because I want you to see our sanctuaries. And so, Pastor Bradley, you can share something about Gloria Day. This is a picture of Gloria Day. And in a moment, we'll divide into two groups so that we can have all the Mount Zion folks with Pastor Bradley and all the Gloria Day folks with myself. But at least here you can see the picture of the building. Anything you want to tell us?
Actually, it's nice to show this building because this is Gloria Day's new building, built in 1950. The congregation used to be located in another place in St. Paul, but originally Gloria Day had land on Summit Avenue right next to the land where Mount Zion is built. And there was some land in between, and there was some swapping around, and Mount Zion got the land there on Summit and built your sanctuary, and we moved out to Snelling Avenue. So part of your building is on land that used to be owned by Gloria Day before we moved to this new site. So we actually, that's when I think we kind of really started to become friends and began to build a relationship with one another.
Yeah, so that is the beginning of our long history from the 1950s. We were both building at the same time, and we both actually had the same architect for the renovation of our buildings as well. But here's a picture that you could describe as well from that time.
We have a chapel in our sanctuary, a small space where we have some smaller services. And this is one of the stained glass windows in that chapel. And this window was a gift from Mount Zion to Gloria Day when we were building this church. So thank you so much for helping to make our sanctuary beautiful. You can see the Shema there in the center. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. All of the windows are shepherd windows. So you've got in the top part some sheep there, and it says, the Lord is my shepherd. And I'm not sure if you can see it real closely, but there's also gophers in this window, and squirrels, and corn, and Minnesota flowers. So thank you, Mount Zion. And this is our main sanctuary. This is the big church. It's decorated in this picture for Advent, which is the 4 weeks that lead up to our big festival at Christmas time. So you can see what it looks like. Actually, it looks like that right now because we're starting to record services for those Sundays. Usually they all fall in December. We have 2 altars, a place where we share a meal. There's the one in the front, and then there's an old one in the back there, the marble one. We don't use that one so much anymore. It's kind of old school. We come closer with a little smaller table. I'm not sure why there's an offering plate on that picture, but
I might have gotten that from the website.
all right. It's all right. If anyone would like to make an offering tonight, you are certainly free to do that.
So I'll just share, this is a picture of Mount Zion's building on Summit Avenue. And I'll say that when we swapped properties, it's partly because the population of Gloria Dei was moving to Highland, and it made sense for folks to have the church close. For Mount Zion, it was a little bit, we had some of our population in Highland, but the bigger consideration was for the Jewish community that had been part of Minnesota life since 1856. Mount Zion's the oldest Jewish congregation in the upper Midwest. We had fur traders come up the Mississippi from St. Louis in 1854 and founded the congregation around that time, before Minnesota was a state. But to have the Jewish community have their synagogue on Summit Avenue, on the line that led to the Catholic Cathedral and to the state capitol, was a sign of coming of age and the Jewish community being understood and accepted more fully. And so that swap that we did with Gloria Dei was really important to the Jewish community at that time. So that's the outside. This is the inside, the sanctuary. This is actually shows the ark open with the Torah covers covered in white. So just like in Gloria Dei, the colors suggest seasons, so too we cover our Torah scrolls, the Bible, with those colors suggesting times. And the white is the high holy days, which was September, October time. And I'll stop sharing now and say that the other nice thing that everybody here should know, and know as part of your history and part of your future, hopefully, is that we work together, our congregations. Project Home is something where we are helping to help the people in our communities who are without homes, families without homes, find temporary shelter. In our COVID time, that has not been happening there, but we are still sending our volunteers to the places. Well, let me ratchet that back. They're not needing as many volunteers right now. In past times, our volunteers have worked together, our congregations have worked together on that. We have studied together. Genesis, years ago, we studied together. We have done classes about Israel and about Israelis and Palestinians, and about real lives of people in the Middle East and how we can learn together. And so there are many levels that we have worked in years past and will continue in the future.
One of the special sharings about Project Home is that we host the families in December at Gloria Dei, but Mount Zion people come and volunteer on Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day so that our people can have those holidays to be at home. So it's a really wonderful gift to us.
So our plan right now is to do 3 things tonight. One is to have this divided time where Gloria Dei students are with me and Mount Zion with Pastor Bradley. So you have Q&A about Lutheranism, about Judaism, Christianity in large. Then come back together to learn the whole history of Jewish-Christian relations for 2,000 years. That's easy enough. And then to have a time for you to be in small groups to talk with one another about Passover and Easter connections, things that mean something to you about your own traditions, mostly just a chance to connect with each other. So those are the 3 things we're going to do. We invited everyone to rename yourself with an MZ if you're from Mount Zion at the beginning of your name, or a GD at the beginning of your name if you're from Gloria Dei. But Katie, so Pastor Bradley, I will share the screen as we go to this next section to talk about some history here. And I have, are you able to describe Nostra Aetate and the ELCA documents?
Sure.
And just so you can see, I've got, these 3 slides here for you.
Okay. Let me just preface this by saying, as we know, Christianity and Judaism have had a difficult relationship over the centuries. And in the 20th century, following the Holocaust, Christians began to see what the implications were for many of the anti-Semitic or hateful language that they had used over the centuries, or the way that they understood Judaism, that really all of that came to play in the Holocaust. And so Christians began to say, we need to rethink who we are and how we have been. And one of the first big documents to do that, you can go to that slide, that first slide, Adam, was the Roman Catholic Church in the 1960s. This was a time period called Vatican II. It was a great time of renewal and change in the Catholic Church. They changed things that had been in place for 500 years. And they changed them in the matter of course of years. But one of the most important documents that they produced was this one called Nostra Aetate. They always name them after the first few words of the document in Latin, and this means in our time. And they were really clear in that document that Christians and Jews are part of one religious family, that we trace our heritage to Abraham and Sarah, and that we should not think, Christians should not think of Jews as apart from God. They also said that Jews were not responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus. That was one of the really horrible things that Christians said, and was used to justify violence and, frankly, stealing the wealth of the Jewish community at various times in history. So here's some quotes from that document. God holds the Jews most dear for their sake of their fathers. He does not repent of the gifts he makes or of the call he issues, such as the witness of the apostle. I'm not going to talk about that part, but here's this next. It's true the Jewish authorities and those who follow their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. For us at Gloria Dei, even now when we read the story of Jesus' passion, which is his death in the Gospel of John, we change the language. There are many times it says the Jews said, crucify him, crucify him. We now read that as the Judeans, because what we understand that it was political authorities, Roman authorities, and Jewish religious authorities who were in league with Rome that wanted to silence Jesus because of his preaching about justice and the poor and the overturning of the order. And so we've tried to really change our language about that. And then the church said, we can't persecute. We have to stand against anti-Semitism. Okay, so you can go to the next one. Lutherans also felt a really special responsibility to this, because Luther said some really terrible things. Anti-Semitism was really deep in Germany at the time of Luther, and Luther was no exception. He spouted some really terrible stuff. So Lutherans in the 20th century said, we especially have to repent, since he was one of our founding people. So this is the quote from that document. In the spirit of that truth-telling, we who bear his name and heritage must with pain acknowledge also Luther's anti-Judaic diatribes and the violent recommendations of his later writings against the Jews. Grieving the complicity of our own tradition within this history of hatred, moreover, we express our urgent desire to live out our faith in Jesus Christ with love and respect for the Jewish people. We recognize in anti-Semitism a contradiction and an affront to the gospel. That's the story of Jesus, a violation of our hope and calling, and we pledge this church to oppose the deadly working of such bigotry, both within our own circles and in the society around us. And Lutherans have continued to work on that and have developed really close relationships with Jewish communities all around the world.
I'll just say, and jump in here and just say, I don't know how you hear what Pastor Bradley just shared, because it is extraordinary. So how long have Jews and Christians known each other? 2,000 years, right? It's only 1965, which is it was just 55 years ago, a couple weeks ago, that this changed, which is huge. 1994, that is like yesterday. I know it's before you were born, but that is like yesterday. And so that is extraordinary how that has changed as well. And oh, thank you, Sarah, for responding to the question in the chat. So one of the questions in the chat was, how do we respond? How do Jews think about other religions? And that's actually part of what I want to share now. But in general, one quick idea is that there's something called the Noahide laws, which says that Christians follow the one God and Muslims follow the one God. So we're all brothers and sisters in this monotheism. But anybody who just follows 7 laws that Noah followed is considered righteous and goes to the world to come. So you don't have to be Jewish to be able to do so. That is, anybody who doesn't murder, doesn't steal, and is not an idolater. So there's some question about people who are not following the one God, and there's a little more theological challenge, I would say, there on a literal level, but the idea is a much more expansive idea that everyone's included. Here's what I want to share. The extraordinary documents that the Catholic Church started in 1965, and then the ELC, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, in 1994, the Jewish community basically was saying, wow, thank you. There were no statements that the Jewish community was making, no introspection that the Jewish community was making about its own relationship to Christianity. So in the year 2000, there was such a statement, and that's what I want to share now. It was called Dabru Emet, and it was a way of responding to this from the Jewish community. And this was, we don't have an organized way to do it. There's no pope, and there's no, among all the different branches, no specific way of bringing us all together. So this was 170 Jewish scholars and leaders from all 4 branches of Judaism: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionists. I'll leave it there. September 2000, Dabru Emet means speak truth. And I want to just give you the highlights. There are 8 of them, 8 highlights. Some of them I'll read a little louder, a little longer. So these are some of them I cut out here. But number 1, Jews and Christians worship the same God. And again, this is speaking to the Jewish community, because some Jewish community members might say, well, no, Christians are, this is something else. Jesus, that's another God. No, it's the same God that we worship. Jews and Christians seek authority from the same book, the Bible. We call Tanakh, and Christians call the Old Testament. Tanakh is an acronym for the 3 parts: Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. So that's the most accurate way to call our Bible. Some will say Hebrew scriptures, which is a way of recognizing its tradition. Although ironically, one of the books is in Aramaic, so some sticklers say it's not all Hebrew, but you don't have to worry about that. Number 3, Christians can respect the claim of the Jewish people upon the land of Israel. This is a significant, I'll just read this part. The most important event for Jews since the Holocaust has been the reestablishment of a Jewish state in the Promised Land. As members of a biblically based religion, Christians appreciate that Israel was promised and given to Jews as the physical center, the covenant between them and God. Many Christians support the state of Israel for reasons far more profound than mere politics. As Jews, we applaud this support. We also recognize that Jewish tradition mandates justice for all non-Jews who reside in the Jewish state. We could spend an entire session on what this means, right? And I will just say simply, and I hope you can hear this, as Jews, we say criticism of the government of Israel is absolutely fine. Just as we know criticism of our own government is absolutely fine. And the government does not speak for the idea of Israel. So Prime Minister Netanyahu does not represent my vision and values as a Jew, for instance. We'll go to the next page, whoops. Number 4, Jews and Christians accept the moral principles of Torah, such as all of us created in the image of God. Number 5, and this was the most significant point of this document, and this was the response: Nazism was not a Christian phenomenon. Without the long history of Christian anti-Judaism and Christian violence against Jews, Nazi ideology could not have taken hold, nor could it have been carried out, but Nazism itself was not an inevitable outcome of Christianity. Those few sentences would take a lot of time to help us talk through and what that all means, but it was really important to say there was a lot of soul searching after the Holocaust by Christians, and this was the Jewish community saying, it's not your fault. So that was significant. And the other 3, I'll just go to the last one. Jews and Christians must work together for justice and peace. That is something that we can do and must do, and that's something that our congregations continue to do. Friends, we are now time to have some time for you to talk, and anybody who's feeling shy, and I'm encouraging you to step up to the plate a little bit more to speak. We're going to put you into small groups. Katie is going to do so. I will put some questions in the chat that we created together. They are based on just talking to each other. Talk about, introduce yourself. And here's the most important thing. When you get into your group, the only awkward moment will be at the very beginning where one of you is going to have to become a facilitator for your group. So when you get into your groups, somebody's going to be brave enough to say, all right, I guess I'll do it. So if one of you can do that, and that person's just going to call on each person to answer the question that comes to the chat, such as introduce yourself, talk about your what you think are the most important parts of your tradition and faith. What is your feelings? What are your experiences with Easter or Passover? And that's all we're going to have time for. So Easter and Passover, I'll just say why those two. Those are both our birth holidays. For Judaism, we became a people as we left Egypt, and that's our narrative. For Christians, that's the death and resurrection of Jesus, and that's the birth of Christianity. So Pastor Riley, is that enough to leave it there, or do you want to add something?
No, that's perfect.
So Katie will put you into groups. Look into the chat for the questions, but first pick a facilitator, and you'll have about 12 minutes.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I think the work of interfaith conversation and understanding one another across religious lines is still really important in a world that really wants to divide people and religions and nations and races. So this work to understand each other and to understand that we're under one umbrella of God's grace and love, I think is really important in making a better world. So thanks for being part of that in a little way tonight.
I'll just say amen. Beautifully said. Thank you. And just saying want to add how complicated it can be to do dialogue. This is, here we are finally having one moment for our Mount Zion students, at least this is it. And this is all we do for interfaith dialogue for confirmation, and it's not enough. I mean, I wish we had more time. But the other thing I want to say is that when I was younger and when there's documents that we were saying, it was always about Christian-Jewish dialogue. For about 50 years, Christian-Jewish dialogue. I went to national conferences. I went to Charleston, just a couple years older than you. I went to Charleston, South Carolina for the National Conference of Christians and Jews. And there were hundreds of people there and talking about how do we improve our relationships. Those things don't happen anymore because we see ourselves as part of a much larger group of people and faiths. And so it's Muslims and Hindus and Jains and Sikhs and all the different faiths and Buddhists. And Pastor Bradley and I are part of something called Minnesota Multi-Faith Network, which is all the different faiths of Minnesota coming together and working as one. And I see that Pastor Lois is joining us at the end, which is wonderful. Anybody have any last questions before we conclude?
All right.
We just want to say welcome to Pastor Lois Pallmeyer.
Pastor Lois Pallmeyer there.
She and I have often co-led this conversation in years past, and it was wonderful with Pastor Bradley tonight, and I'm glad that you're able to join us. Any parting words?
Oh, I'm so glad to see everybody. The other group just finished, so I thought, oh, I'm just going to go bomb into the 10th graders and see how it went. So good to see you all. It's always a good conversation. I'm sorry I wasn't with you tonight, but I'm glad you were able to meet with Pastor Bradley and Rabbi Spilker.
Wonderful. Really great being with everyone tonight.
Yep. Thank you. Blessings to you all.